Welcome. My name is Molly. This is Dale. We both work with St. Elias Alpine Guides. We are standing in Wrangell St. Elias National Park, the largest national park in the country. And right in the very middle of that park is Kennecott, which is where we are today. Kennecott is a historic copper mining town and is now actually a national landmark, which is operated and run by the National Park Service.
We're standing here at the top of the 14-story concentration mill. There are over 5 mines at the top of the mountain, 70 miles of tunnels, 2 aerial tramways brought the copper out of the mountain down to this point. This is where it all started. We're going to go through the building. We'll talk about how they did copper mining and how they did the milling. Let's check it out. Ore carts from the mountains would have come down that aerial tram car into this floor. They would be dragged along a rail system inside the building, and if you worked on this floor, your job would be to take that cart, unhinge it, and dump it into this Buchanan jaw crusher. This worked very much the same way your jaw did. There's one stationary piece and one piece that would crush like this. So the rocks would fall into the middle, they'd be broken up into smaller pieces. A young man who lied about his age, his name was George Sullivan, worked on this floor. He came in here and he accidentally tripped and fell into the Buchanan jaw crusher there. But he managed to throw his arms out so he didn't fall in, but the carts started to back up. And so the supervisor at the time noticed the carts were backing up, came over, plucked him out of there, put him on his feet, and told him to get back to work.
And George Sullivan went on to become mayor of Anchorage. So most people, when they think of copper, think of things like copper pennies, copper wire, that nice golden glow. Here up in the mountains, the copper is in a slightly different form called chalcocite. This rock here is a pretty good example of what you might find coming out of the mines. We have the local limestone and then the copper, which is embedded in the limestone. This building here's primary function was to sort these two, the heavier copper from the lighter limestone. Occasionally, you would isolate this copper fairly early on in the process, and whenever that happened, you have these high-grade ore chutes. You can see one right here behind me, and that sends the ore straight to the bottom of the mill to be sacked out.
I have some elevator shafts here, little metal scoops mounted onto a canvas belt would go down to the bottom of the elevator shaft and bring the copper up, and they would dump it over that little partition there down towards the vibrating screens. We're going to see those in a minute. Pretty impressive elevator shaft. You wouldn't want to fall in there. Now, one of the super cool things about this mill building, this isn't just anywhere. Look out there. You can see the Root Glacier, Donahoe Peak, and way out in the distance, the bottom of Mount Blackburn. It's the 5th highest peak in the United States. And that's the Kennecott Glacier there. Pretty fantastic setting for this beautiful building. We're going to head down the stairs here. We're going to see how the mill operated. Crushed rocks that came up the elevator would then come down these 2 chutes onto what's called a vibrating screen. Now this vibrating screen would go like this, would shake pretty aggressively. The rocks would flow down over the screen. And rocks that were small enough would go through the screen. They're the right size. We're going to send them downstairs for sorting. But the rocks that were too big would roll down the screen and into a different trough. We're going to send them downstairs to the crushing department. Now we're going to add wash water, which is going to flow across the screen to keep the screen clean. Now, but if we add wash water, what do we need to do with this building? We got to heat it. It's cold here in Alaska. So we've got a radiator over there. Now the management philosophy was that cold workers would work harder than warm workers, so this building wasn't super warm, just warm enough to keep the workers keeping moving and keep the water from freezing. All right, we're going to head down to the crushing department.
Like Dale said, not all the ore this early on in the process was quite ready to go down to the bottom yet. So from those vibrating screens, some of the ore would come into this room, the crushing room. I've got 2 fairly large crushing machines right next to me here. The ore comes down in this chute. This machine here actually weighs 23,000 pounds, which is about the same weight as 23 full-grown grizzlies. So it gets crushed up. Over here, the ore gets crushed up, and then it rides back up these elevator chutes right here and is resorted to make sure it's sized correctly before it moves on through the building. In order to work in this building, you had to be pretty strong. Right here, we actually have a wrench, and this wrench is quite heavy. I actually have a hard time lifting it up. You can only imagine how strong you'd have to be to use it.
All right, so we've left the crushing department. Now we're at the beginning of the sorting department. Upstairs, we broke the rocks into 2 pieces. We broke them into a bigger size and a smaller size. We sorted them in those screens. So now we need to find a way to get the copper away from the limestone. This is how we're going to do it. This is called a Hancock jig. The rocks would come in at that end of the box. This box would have been filled with water, and this big thing in the middle is called the jig. And here's how it worked. The rocks would be in the jig, and then the jig would move up and to the right and throw the rocks over. Up and to the right, throw the rocks over. Now the copper is heavy. This is key. The copper is going to fall down quicker, and the limestone is going to stay up, and then it's going to fall a little slower. So the copper would fall out the bottom, the limestone would move this way and fall off the end. We'd send the limestone across the street, put it in our tailing pile, but the copper we would drag up these scrapers and send it downstairs for sacking.
So in the middle of wilderness Alaska, if something goes wrong in this building, you'd better be able to fix it on your own. Here we have our repair shop. You'll notice there are quite a few windows, multiple radiators, so those repairmen would be able to stay warm and use their hands pretty effectively. One of the more notorious machines, the shaker tables, broke pretty frequently, and this was where they would be fixed up.
This is a shaker table. This is an important part of the sorting process. We sorted the big rocks upstairs in the Kennecott jig. Now we're going to sort the small ones. So the copper ore would come down this chute, down through a pipe into that box right there, then it would flow out onto the table. Then water, we're going to call it wash water, would come from this pipe down into the box, spread out, and also flow out onto the table. Now we're going to take the whole table, and we're going to start it from rest and accelerate it towards the back wall, and then stop it. You can see the rocks slide this way. Now the heavy rocks, the copper ones, slow down a little slower than the limestone. So the copper is going to migrate towards that end of the table, and the limestone is going to migrate towards this end of the table because of the wash water. So the copper is going to fall off this side. We're going to put it into a pipe and send it downstairs for sacking. The limestone, however, is going to fall off this end of the table. We can send it into another pipe and send it down to the other side of the road into the tailings pile. Now all these shaker tables operate off of the same drive shaft. There you can see it where that belt is looped around at the top of the other floor. So all the tables are running at the same time. Now what happens if this one breaks? I can't turn off all of the shaker tables, so I'm going to take this handle here and I'm going to pull the belt over onto a flywheel, which can turn without moving the table. So I've isolated this table. I can take my riffle, which broke, over into the workshop, fix it, and then when I'm done, table's back in operation.
So here we are in the sacking shed. This is one of the sacking stations along the bottom here. We've got these sacks right here. We fill them with ore in these chutes right here and toss them out onto the awaiting train. The sacks could weigh between 60 and 100 pounds, so this was a tough job.
And there you have it. We started at the top of the 14-story mill building. We've come all the way down through the building. We talked about crushing. We broke the rocks into pieces. We talked about sorting. And we talked about sacking. We put it onto a train and we sent it out to Cordova.
So thank you so much for joining us today.